It's the internet. You're busy. Let's do this for November 14th, 2022. For the next hour or so, let me help you sort through the world of gaming on Game Mess Mornings Live with me, Jeff Grubb. Today, it's been 2 years, so it's time for a new PlayStation, and we have the results from the October NPD. But first, please join me in welcoming today's co-host to Game Mess Mornings. It's Patrick Klepek. Patrick, how are you doing?
I'm back.
He's
Bears
back.
Lost. Things are normal. You know, that's
I'm back in my happy place. Going in to the game, what were your feelings?
Well, you know, there was a moment in that game where it was 24-10, and you know, it's like this. We got this. We're just gonna squeeze the life out of Jared Goff. We're gonna
Yep.
pop him like a pumpkin, and it turns out we didn't, and it was all the more painful. As I told you, I woke up on Sunday morning, was in Wisconsin with some friends, and I got a message from someone that said, "Hey, you know, I do some sales stuff. A client gave me 2 tickets to the Bears game. Do you want to go?" And I'm like, I'm a full 2.5 hours from being able to go all the way downtown. And I told my wife, I'm going to turn these tickets down. It doesn't make any sense. And bless my wife, I picked correctly. She looked me in the eyes and said, "I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You're a Bears fan. We're going to pack up this house. You're going to get in the car. You're going to order a cab so it'll pick you up from the house when we get there, and you get your ass to the game." And so I did. And I took a friend and
hell yeah.
So we had a good time.
Yeah, I mean, that's what matters, right? It's all about having fun. I mean, whatever happens on the field is secondary to all that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's there was a point there where the Lions were number 2 in the NFC last night, NFC North, excuse me. And I was just like, "Oh, wait, what? Excuse me?" And I'm like, "Okay, fine. Yeah, that's what we got going here."
You want to make it all the worse is like, you know, I'm in this cab heading downtown. Like, we managed to get back to I was in Wisconsin with my neighbors, and I was like, I looked at the clock on the lift that was picking us up. We're gonna get there at 11:50. We're gonna slide right in, like right as the game starts. I'm like, I'm feeling good vibes. You know what? I'm gonna make this cab pay for itself. We're gonna do a 2-game parlay with the Bears beating the Lions and the Packers losing later today. $60 win out of this, and we are Super Bowl Super Bears, and I'm not paying for this cab downtown.
I mean, both those were looking real good early in those games, like late into those games. Yeah. Oof. But let's get into the news, though. Patrick, I'm so sorry about your Bears. I'm so sorry about my Lions. And as always, fuck the Packers. Before we get into this mess, though, let's explain ourselves. Each weekday, I, Jeff Grubb, will help piece your gaming life back together. That includes breaking news and maybe even some of our own original reporting. For all these topics, I'll get the input of a bona fide expert who will make me look smart. If you are watching live on Twitch, welcome. Hello, Twitch. You can always listen to the show later on podcast feeds by searching for Game Mess Mornings or find the RSS on giantbomb.com. And if you're listening on podcasts, hello. You can also catch the show later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. Okay, we have a lot to get into, so let's start the morning mess with the October 2022 NPD report. This morning, Matt Piscatella took to Twitter, posted a lot of details about this. This got sent over an email a little bit ago, so I'll read from his direct wording here. U.S. consumer spending on video game content, hardware, and accessories totaled $4.3 billion during October 2022, flat when compared to a year ago. Growth in digital sales and subscriptions for consoles and PC video game content, driven in large part by the release of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, was offset by declines in mobile content and video game hardware sales. Year-to-date spending has fallen 7% to this point in 2021 at $42.7 billion. This is like one of the first months in quite some time, Patrick, where we've gotten one of these reports and it hasn't been down pretty significantly, 5 to 7%. And, obviously an average of 7% for the year. The comparison was always, well, those were the heavy pandemic years. That was the time when everyone was staying inside, spending a lot more money on video games than on other forms of entertainment. It was never quite as dramatic of a drop-off as I think some people were expecting. A lot of people kept some of the momentum they had in gaming, but now it's going flat. I think obviously Modern Warfare 2 being a much bigger hit than Vanguard is a big part of that. But do you think that we're coming out of this and people are like just sort of settling into an equilibrium with where gaming fits into their life?
I think if you look at any other industry that experienced a COVID spike, and we're seeing this most acutely in the tech sector, the losses, the L's there, the bets they started making over the course of COVID, thinking this is actually a market correction. This is actually a long-term trend. And if video games are at worst, some months a little down, other months flat, and otherwise kind of staying the course, I think that's sort of, I don't know what else you could expect from an industry that spiked so hard over the last couple of years. Like, it's not about gaining momentum. It's about mitigating losses. And what we're not seeing, at least, so far in the video game industry, is whatever losses are occurring aren't concurrently leading to mass layoffs at companies, right? Like, we're not seeing like, oh, hey, we did so much investment in video games as a result of this increased attraction, whether that was games like the industry recognizing a blip for what it was and being a little smarter about their spending and expansion, whether it just takes longer to build up those things. So games wasn't able to just acutely hire thousands and thousands of people that they were clearly going to have to lay off 2 to 3 years later, whenever the dust started settling on the situation. But it's not my money, but it certainly seems like you take this as a win given how bad things are elsewhere. And you're combining that not just with a reduced consumer spending as their money goes to different parts of the world just because of vaccines and tired of the pandemic or whatever. Take your pick. We have like a weird pseudo. Is it a recession? Is it not a recession? But the economy is weird, and when the economy is weird, if you're not going too far backwards, you're technically going forwards, because whenever it all inevitably comes back, the yin and the yang of it all, like that's a good place to be.
Right. Yeah. They're just they're skidding on the brakes or trying to understand like what the economy skidding on the brakes is going to do to them. And video games are always in a weird place with that stuff. I mean, Bobby Kotick obviously said, video games are recession proof. That was never exactly true. It hurts in different ways. I always remember talking to an Australian developer who during the recession in 2008 was like, we used to get a ton of work for hire studios. And then when they had to cut budgets, they're like, well, we're going to stop working with those Australian studios. They're slightly more expensive. We're going to start looking for places that are cheaper. And it's like, okay, well, that destroyed that industry. So we're like, I think I'm still personally looking around to see where those kinds of cuts are happening at these companies. But I think they're also still trying to figure out like what they can get away with. They've spent years cutting back on spending in every possible way that they can. And there's not left, there's not a lot of meat left on those bones to cut away. I'm interested the mobile being down. I'm like trying to figure out like what that is. And people are spending, less time on their phones. Were they when they were at home?
Does this account for Marvel Snap?
Yes, exactly. Marvel Snap. It must not. Obviously, it must not. I'm still a lot of Snap over here. But it's like, that is hurting some of these guys, like Take-Two spending $12 billion on Zynga. Mm-hmm. Timing on that seems like it couldn't have been worse. But I honestly am like struggling to figure out like, I thought people would be playing more phone games because they're kind of getting out of the house. And it's like, well, this is easy to play right now, but maybe I'm just struggling to figure out what that looks like.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's, do you have any offhand, like, what is this relative? Like, is this a downward trend over the course of the year, or is this sort of a blip with mobile in general?
No, it's been pretty consistent that mobile's been down at least, at least in line with the rest of the industry, but more often than not, it's been down a little bit more sharply than the rest of the industry, from what I can remember. At least according to the MPD, which is the United States.
Right. It would. I mean, if I'm just like taking a shot in the dark, it wouldn't shock me that yes, people's travel and movement might be up, especially in the summer and fall months. And we've had an especially, at least in the Midwest, like an especially warm fall. Like it is only like the weather has just started dropping off out here. And it's like, yes, you might be traveling more and you might be on your phone more. But if we think of mobile as like, for some people being a prime platform, it may be the case that mobile does not necessarily mean on the move. It just means they spend the most time on a phone or an iPad engaging with games of that type. And so it wouldn't shock me if maybe like mobile use is up in terms of using their phone, but not necessarily games, because they're not sitting on the couch and churning through a Netflix series, which might account for some of that.
That sounds exactly right. Some content tracking here. October video game content sales grew 2% when compared to October 2021 to $3.7 billion. Content performance was driven by the favorable comparable of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, releasing October track period compared to the Call of Duty Vanguard's release in November of last year. So those things didn't even match up. So they're not even really being compared 1-to-1. But Modern Warfare 2 was October's best-selling game, the 15th consecutive year that a Call of Duty release has ranked as the highest-selling game in its release month. Man, it really has just been that long. And then Gotham Knights was number 2 for the month. I'm trying to see if there's we got the chart down here. Other new games in the chart: number 5, NHL 23. Number 6, Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope. That does include digital because it was a Ubisoft game. Typically, Nintendo games wouldn't include that. Persona 5 back in the top 10 at number 7. Last month it was 291. So Getting on new platforms might have helped that game sell some more. Bayonetta 3 at number 9, and then other new games in the top 20. Star Ocean: The Divine Force was number 14. Dragon Ball: The Breakers, which I didn't even know came out, number 16. And PGA Tour 2K23 at number 17. Dragon Ball Breakers, that's the one that's that asymmetrical, like sort of like Ready or Dead by Dawn, right? It's like that, but with Dragon Ball characters.
Sure. If I agree with you, we can both possibly be wrong at the same time.
And that's the way to do it.
I can't give you a better answer than that. I mean, some of this is just, it's been a real down year for AAA, like real highs in terms of the games themselves, right? Like, I've played a good chunk of God of War. That seems excellent. Elden Ring, excellent. But when you start like ticking off, what are the other games that would sort of like drive, even in a year that was trying to keep pace, like they just don't have the horses.
No.
Like we don't, like if you were to look at the beginning of this year and the schedule that was to be, like we had a handful of good, like a really packed February, a ghost town. And, there's no disrespect to a game like Bayonetta 3, but like it's just not operating at that same sort of scale. And then we get God of War, Modern Warfare back to back, and like that's going to bookend the year, and that's going to look pretty good. But this is an industry like we otherwise would have expected a Starfall, like 5 or 6 other like big tentpole games, and those just didn't happen this year. And whether they all happen next year, you would normally just say, oh, I guess we're just going to be overstuffed. But if we've learned anything over COVID, like. No, like they could all be delayed another year, and you shouldn't be shocked. But I think that tells the story somewhat of what's happening here as well. Is that I think it has broadly been a good year for games in terms of the games I have played.
I've enjoyed a lot of them. Yeah,
it is, but it's not necessarily been a terrific year for those big drivers of games, like the big tentpole stuff. It just hasn't been a real consistent year.
Yeah, when you go looking at like the past few months, you're like, what were those? It was Gotham Knights, all right, and then it was Saints Row. And not much else, and then so you're right. You have God of War on one side, and
Pokemon's still to come. That'll be another
obviously. But I think Pokemon will do fine. But you pointed out Bayonetta 3, and I think Bayonetta 3 is hitting the switch at a time when maybe interest actually is beginning to wane. It's weird to feel like that was the top selling console always for years and years and years. And then sort of at a snap of a finger, suddenly it feels kind of old. And I think people are feeling that way coming to Bayonetta 3 on the Switch. At least that's my read into it. I mean, we look at the hardware sales here. Dollar sales of video game hardware fell 10% in October when compared to a year ago to $424 million. Double-digit percentage growth for dollar sales of both the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series consoles was offset by declines on other platforms. So, I mean, obviously that's PlayStation 4, Xbox One selling slower, but most of that's got to be the Switch, just kind of coming back down to earth finally. PlayStation 5 was the best-selling video game hardware of October in both units and dollar sales, while Xbox Series ranked second across both measures. So, it does, when it happens all at once, and it feels like it's happening to the Switch right now, where people are ready to move on. And I've pointed to things like the Steam Deck just slightly dialing up dialing things up on the pressure on the Switch. Like that does make it feel a little bit older, even if everyone doesn't have a Steam Deck, obviously.
Like even just like people around you. Granted, like you and I represent folks buying the Steam Deck represent a minority, but I think more often than not, like folks that I know that have gotten a Steam Deck stop playing their Switch, or like their priority has shifted. And I think that's just happening a little more broadly. Even like a Bayonetta 3, like it performs like shit. Like it's like not like it's fine. Like they made it work, but like that game more than any other is like that is a creaky piece of hardware.
Yes.
Nintendo makes it work the best they can, but even their games, even like the Bowser's Fury, that was a game that was like switching between 30 and 60 frames a second in Dr. Handheld mode, and like. If Nintendo's having to make compromises like that, then that we're reaching the end of the road. And so, I feel like the amount of times people have predicted, don't worry, new Nintendo hardware is around the corner, means you just shouldn't. You shouldn't do a 2-team parlay betting the Bears are going to win and the Packers are going to lose. Just the same way that you shouldn't say there's a new piece of Switch hardware around the corner. Those are both bad vibes. And all you've done is just had someone at Nintendo hit a button that says 6 more months. 6 more months. You don't say that to us.
Yep. You don't tell us what to do.
But it does feel like we're primed for something like that to eventually, sometime next year, come out of nowhere and reinvigorate interest in a way that it's going to keep selling, right? Like they could not do anything for another 10 years. not release any more games for another 10 years. And the Switch would probably be like a very healthy business that didn't do anything except sell this Switch in its current form. But in terms of reinvigorating things, I mean, you know, you see the Mario movies coming out next year. There's a lot of like landmarks you could see where Nintendo could have, you know, a new Zelda, like a real upswing in interest and kind of get people psyched about what they're doing again. Even like the new Mario and Rabbids game. Like, I quite like it. I don't like it as much as I thought I was going to as a huge fan of the first game, but it just seems like even these what would be tentpole games for the Switch are having trouble getting traction from people as like the Switch falls down in their hierarchy of daily, like sort of like a platform that you turn to. And I think you're seeing that reflected in lack of attention and interest in even games like Bayonetta 3 and Mario and Rabbids.
Yeah, it's I think it's just, you know, it's falling to the back burner right now. And, you know, once things go on the back burner, it's very easy for them to just get ignored. I mean, obviously, Splatoon 3, a massive hit. I mean, very few games are going to sell as much as Splatoon 3 is going to sell. Big part of that, though, is Japan. And what we're looking at here are United States sales numbers. That's what NPD tracks. So that's where some of that incongruity comes from, obviously. But still, I think we could see a slight trend happen here. It doesn't mean Nintendo's in trouble. It just means that we've reached a somewhat natural conclusion. And you add to that pile, you know, the problems with piracy that the Switch is now facing. Every single one of these big games is everywhere, all over the internet, like a couple weeks before they come out. And I think that puts Nintendo in a position where you're right. Next year, it could come out of anywhere. It could come out of nowhere, and we start hearing about it. But that's just me kind of hoping at the same time, because I'm not going to make that prediction. Not going to actually make that prediction. Let's, you know, accessories. Accessory spending in October declined 8% when compared to a year ago to $148 million. The PlayStation 5 DualSense wireless controller Midnight Black was the best-selling accessory of October in dollar sales. So accessory sales back on the decline. This kind of, it was another one that like I'd try to look at. It's been up and down. This month, down pretty significantly, but I think the last couple of months it's been flat or even up a little bit. So people are, kind of, probably what's happening here is in October, do you go out and spend a lot on accessories, or do you just wait until November for Black Friday for Black Friday deals? I can imagine a lot of people are like, hey, let's budget a little bit better. And if I'm going to actually go get a headset or controller, a lot of times those are gifts. Yeah, maybe you do wait for a deal, right?
Are you sure they're not all just like me and that they spent $300 on a 12-foot Home Depot skeleton and they just don't have the money for these accessories?
I mean, obviously that's the biggest reason. That's the biggest. Man, if I could get one of those bad boys, oh boy, I want one so bad. Our neighbor has.
I just got ours is an all year 12-foot skeleton.
Of course.
We prepped the neighborhood. I don't have an HOA. You can't tell me what to do with this goddamn skeleton.
My neighbor's the HOA president. I try to butter him up all the time so I can get away with more.
Exactly. But I did give them a heads up when the skeleton went in. They're like, oh, that's so cute. And I was like, yeah, and it's going to be there for 12 months. So I hope you're ready for it. And I just got in the mail a big turkey and some cleavers that are going to go in the hand. And I'm going to get an apron on the 12-foot skeleton. Wait,
so it's out in the front yard and everyone has to deal with it? That's incredible. I love that. That's how durable has it been? Has it been like any sort of like, are you getting your $300 worth, you think?
So I'm a little, you know what, Jeff, if I'm honest, I'm a little worried. Like, this is embarrassing to say when I say it out loud, but I am also on Facebook in one of the 12-foot Home Depot owners groups. It's like 12,000 people strong. There's a bunch
incredible.
And it's useful because people will post like, here's what I did with the skeleton and here's where you can buy it if you want to do something similar. But there's a lot of talk that the material used on the Home Depot skeleton this year, which is the year that I got into it, has gotten a little flimsier over time as they tried to increase production. And Costco did put one out earlier this year. Didn't like it as much. Didn't like the aesthetic. So I held firm. Finally got my Home Depot skeleton. But I am worried. That I'm, at some point in the spring, my boy is going to fall apart and I'm going to be buying a second Home Depot skeleton in the fall of 2023.
Hey, listen, if you get a year of service out of that bad boy, I think that's pretty good stuff.
I agree. That's a good use of funds. My kids don't need to go to college.
We'll move on for the 12-foot skeleton here in a second, everybody. Is it the traditional one that's just like all bones? Because my neighbor's got one that's like the 12-foot one, but he's got like a pumpkin head and it like has glowy eyes.
So yes, there are three. There are variants of the Costco enormous boy Halloween decoration. Yes, there is one that is the orange pumpkin helmet. I think people who usually buy that are getting that because they couldn't find the other one. It's more of like you're 100%. Settling for it. Yes. It's not necessarily the skeleton you wanted. It's the skeleton you have. And I almost bought it because it was available online. And I said, no, I'm going to, it's this skeleton or bust. And I just started. This is so pathetic. I just when I was on errands starting at the end of August, when you could see people were turning over to put out Halloween stuff, I just started making it part of my daily routine. Like some people go to get coffee at Starbucks. It's 7 a.m. I've dropped my kids off at daycare and I'm going on a run at Home Depot to see if they have a 12-foot skeleton. And the second time I did it, they had just put them out. I got my skeleton. So
I need to be more vigilant. That's what I've learned from you here today. I need to be more vigilant. That one right there, the one kid behind me, she loves skeletons, so it's a big reason why I actually want to get it.
I'll keep an eye out. If I hear about anything, I will get the hookup.
We gotta get a Mr. Bones in here. You're looking for the Switch? I think it's upstairs in Emmy's room. I think. God of War Ragnarok is already the biggest launch in franchise's history. That's in the UK, and this comes from Christopher Dring at GamesIndustry.biz. This is based on box sales alone, and based on that alone, it will become the biggest God of War title launch in the UK. God of War Ragnarok will debut at #1, and is the first cross-gen title in the series. Block says, I think Block is one of the persons from the GFK, which tracks physical sales in the UK. Day one physical sales were already greater than any other full week launch sales for other titles in the franchise. It's up, or 55% of PS5 console sales this week are part of God of War hardware bundles. So it's moving a lot of hardware and it's selling very well. This is not surprising in the least, right? This game was going to be massive.
Yeah, I mean, this is Sony's whole MO. This is what they do. Like they take their with the purchase of, Bungie and some of the mobile stuff they're getting into, clearly they understand that it is not necessarily their model of just hit a home run every time and spend a lot of money on something really splashy and people will show up. That is a recipe for disaster if you start whiffing.
Or just getting triples even.
Right. Like, what was the zombie one from a couple years back? Days Gone.
Days Gone.
Right.
Yep.
I was pretty mixed on that game, and some people really love that game, but that was not a home run around the bases style game. And they spent a lot of money on that game. It was in development for a very long time. It had a real mess getting through production. And on the other side of it, you end up with a game that is like, I don't know, a double, to use the baseball, analogy. And that is just not sustainable as games get more expensive. And so, I mean, they knocked it out of the park on this one. Like, this game is going to be huge. It deserves it based on what I've played. But and then also I think, as we were talking about earlier, just the severe lack of AAA elsewhere, I think has people just starved.
People thirsty for this. Yes,
they want a big dumb Marvel movie in video game form. Right. Like that's, and I'm not calling it dumb to be pejorative. It is but it is just like a big, messy, expensive thing that occasionally makes you tear up. And like that's what I get out of a lot of Marvel movies, and that's what I'm going to get out of God of War Ragnarok. And people love that stuff, like they eat it up, and I'm not shocked it's a huge hit. Yeah,
and I mean, and to follow the Marvel metaphor, and this one is growing in the same way those Marvel movies did over time. This is doing significantly better than the last one, which I think is something Sony wasn't sure of, because not a lot of their games have done the last one sold 10 million. So this one's selling 15 million, and now that's setting up a 25 million seller. They've gotten close. They've gotten they've gone in that direction with some of them, but it's been like, this one sold 10 million, this one's selling 11 million. But we sell a certain number of these games to a certain audience, and they always show up and they always buy it right away, and they sell very well at launch, and that's all great. But these games are getting bigger and more expensive all the time. And I think maybe this God of War Ragnarok model is maybe showing like, listen, we didn't invest a ton in that first game. It was so expensive to make, and it did very, very well. And it's no Animal Crossing, but it did very, very well. And let's make another one just kind of building on everything we've done here and see if we can make it bigger in a lot of other ways, while also using a lot of the technology that we've already have, and see if we can make it more cost efficient and yet also sell more by building on these storylines and the emotions that people come to these games for. All of that stuff worked here. It seems like they hit every single possible box they could possibly hit. And this game seems like it's well on its way to doing something like a 15-20 million copies, which, in the first couple of years, which, it seems like, it should do that. No, not every PlayStation first-party game does do exactly that. So, I think they got to be very happy with it.
And I'd be super curious, we can't do the what-if scenario, but, absent the PC release of this game, which did exceptionally well, I think was... it not only sold well, it was a good version of that game, and I think increased a lot of broader awareness, like just in time for people to start getting excited for this one. I mean, I know Sony's kind of been dragged to the PC to be convinced that it was like a good thing for them, but I don't know how you can't they have more, access to data than I do, but I don't know how you can't look at something like this and suspect that it's a combination of starved for AAA. This is a very good game. Like PC audience, like was able to catch up and like get excited for this. Like, I think there's a lot of things that does give them a really interesting model going forward for how to like keep that awareness and interest through different way, ran well on Steam Deck, it's just, there was a lot of stuff going on with this specific game that I think Ragnarok would have been big regardless, but I think there were certain things that broke their way that allowed this one to be positioned as well as it is.
Yeah, I think the next Ghost of Tsushima, right? That comes out and that's massive as well, in a similar way. It's probably not going to, it's going to have a similar growth trajectory that this has, I believe. So, Sony's got to feel pretty good about this stuff because they invest a lot in these. And like you said, you got to hit home runs every time. Well, this is a big enough home run that it can justify other games coming out and maybe being triples for a while, and we'll see.
Well, right, yes, yeah, like that's when you have one of these that overperforms, then it creates an umbrella effect for like that is how these work sometimes. Where like if if they are so big, it's like okay, well then either you can take a risk or something else can underperform and it's not. The hit doesn't hit as hard. Yeah,
and obviously that's got to feel real good when you are about to put out 10 to 12 live service games that are all going to be significantly less expensive than these massive big AAA things. But you're putting out a lot of them, so that cost does accrue, and you just need one of them to really hit, and then maybe it flips back or the other way, and that big live service game that's just printing money pays for all the big AAA games that are your brand, and that's the virtuous cycle that Jim Ryan wants, and we'll see if they get there. The PS5 Slim is coming in Q3 2023. This comes from theleak.co, and it's been lightly corroborated by Tom Henderson at Insider Gaming. It seems to be a bit of a rehash of some of the details we got from a similar story from Tom Henderson at Insider Gaming a few weeks ago. But let's get into it. There's been talk for a lighter, slimmer version of a PlayStation 5 since launch. And according to our source, and again, this is from theleak.co, it is indeed getting a smaller redesigned version next year, but it might not be referred to as a Slim officially. There's a reason why the PS5 is bulky. The CPU, RAM, and SSD controller require a lot of space, mostly to deal with the heat. There have been minor upgrades like one earlier this year, including shrinking the console, but not enough to change the encasement. This upcoming version has a new design with a significant change to its exterior. Our source claims that this new Slim version uses a die shrink treatment that reduces the size of the console enough to validate a new design by Sony. It uses less voltage and therefore runs cooler. It's also more lightweight because of it. Now, they've done all of that stuff except for change the outward appearance of the PlayStation 5 with the last revision. It does use a die shrink. That does use less voltage. It does produce less heat. They shrank the size of the motherboard. Basically, everything inside the PlayStation 5 got significantly smaller. They could redesign the outward appearance, but one of the big reasons that you do that is to get people excited to, get another wave of sales. And, especially there's this works out how it works with like Nintendo handhelds, right? There's an audience that's going to buy every single Nintendo handheld. And they are the engine that fuels the entire process of, okay, we're going to sell it to them again, and they're going to take their secondary hardware or their old hardware and sell it to someone else, give it to a cousin, something like that, and then they can go and then we have a new person buying games, and it's all funded by this person up front buying the hardware over and over and over again. PlayStation home consoles definitely do some of that, but really the big concern here for Sony was being able to make enough PlayStation 5s, and they seem to be well on their way to doing that because of the most recent revision. So I wonder then what is the point of a PlayStation 5 Slim, especially since we know demand is not diminishing anytime soon. It seems like, well, for PlayStation, for Sony, and this story goes on to say that the actual size of the console is also a sticking point. It makes it harder to ship. It makes it heavier. Costs accrue because you have to store all these things, before you're ready to ship them, and they take up so much damn space that's a problem. And so they're looking at the numbers, if we can make these things smaller, make the boxes smaller, that's going to save us a ton of money, and it also will make it easier.
It adds up in scale as opposed to necessarily on a per unit basis.
So all that stuff on the table, how likely do you think this is?
I mean, it seems pretty likely. Not to be overly cynical, Chef, but are we setting up for a scenario in which they are getting the natural sort of cost reductions that come with producing things over time and the slow advance of tech? They will minorly change the outward appearance, maybe not necessarily give it a new name, but you can advertise it as, look, here's the modified design of the PlayStation. Maybe it's slightly cheaper, but it's slightly cheaper because they already raised the price. Are we just going to end up at the original price of the PS5, but they're making more on a per unit basis because of these changes they made internally, and they're going to pitch it as a price cut after they already raised the price?
All that seems so, yes, absolutely they're going to do that. If they even lower the price at all, like, I mean, there's no guarantee
they probably won't.
This thing won't be $550 as well. They're like, listen, it's slimmer, it's sleeker, this is worth that much money. Even if they do that, though, like you're right, they are finding all these other ways to increase their profit margins. So for them, it'll be a win. They'll be using less materials, just in terms of plastics and the heating.
I don't think they lower the price. I think that is baked in. I think
yes.
God of War selling how it's selling, they are under no position to. And if anything, some of those comments from Spencer from a couple of weeks ago, they are by having their price up, they are almost exerting pressure on Microsoft to follow suit in that direction,
yes,
which is not
weirdly.
Usually how the price stuff works with consumer goods like this. But I will not be shocked if, hey, we finally have like the Bethesda's news game is coming out. It'll be a good time to increase the price right the fuck now. And I won't be shocked if that happens alongside sort of like a Game Pass increase, in which that is like, hey, let's just eat some of these vegetables and then we're going to give people a game that they're really excited about. So I assume this PS5 stuff is real, because like it just that has now become part of the cycle. I just think we are further off than ever from actual like pro style revisions.
Right. This is specifically not a pro, right? Yeah. Right. This is a slim version of the existing PS5. No talk, at least as far as I could tell, of even adding more storage. Something that would be, I think, a big seller for a PS5. Sure. But like, just no, it has more storage baked right in. You keep hitting that limit, and you are the kind of person that doesn't want to put in an SSD yourself, which those people exist, absolutely. You're like, oh man, I'll just go get this new one, sell my old one to pay for it, and there we go. But there are no talks of even doing that. So it's like Sony really finding a way, I think, to re-up the sales enthusiasm while also cutting costs, while also making it make more sense in terms of the supply chain. And at the same time, it's just the same thing basically. So yep. But I don't think anyone, this will be our poll question later as a little preview. We're going to talk about this from the poll, but I don't think many people who got that original PS5 are going to feel much of a need to upgrade. The thing's quiet. You're already used to it being in your home. If it doesn't have
made the accommodations already, if you have like issues with it, and yes, they're easier to find, but it's still expensive. I mean, these are like a phone, like you want, or an iPad, like you want to have this for you have it till you break, and then if there's a new one, that's nice. And and even if a world where they things are a little bit different, and it's like, hey, can we do a SKU that we're gonna charge a little bit more for? You know what that is? That's a PSVR 2. Like that. Like it's not gonna end up being a pro model. And God of War is straddling 2 generations. Like it's not going to be until 2-3 years from now that we're even getting games that are native to the hardware. And that's across both. There's not even pressure on either platform. Like they're both doing this. And so I just, I see no reason that's going to come at the end of the generation if it comes at all.
Yeah, we are at that. This thing coming in 2023, that lines up with when we got the Pro model for the PS4, right? It was 2013 and then 2016, right? That's when that happened. So yeah, it lines up, but it's not that. And I think that speaks to what you're talking about. The limitations last generation absolutely were the hardware. They put out crappy hardware, both Sony and Microsoft, because they didn't believe in the consoles. And now here we are. They knew right away that these things were going to do very well. They've been proven right. And now what is the limitation? It's not the Xbox Series S. It's not last gen hardware. It's not like low end PCs. It's time and money. And now that's going to be the limiter from now on. Time and money. That's it. How much time and money a developer has. Can you put out a game that looks like The Last of Us, part 2 on PS4? If you have enough money, you can. And not everyone has that much time and money, but now they have all these hardware that can easily run those things. So, yeah, Slim for now, Pro maybe a long way down the line.
The only thing I can think of is that at some point in the next year and a half, we're going to lose these performance modes. Like the 60 FPS world you've gotten used to is not long for this world, and that transition probably comes with, I think there'll still be some. I bet Insomniac always has one. Like I think there'll be developers who prioritize it, but at some point the dam is going to break on that. And it's like I can almost imagine that's how you position whatever new hardware comes along, like mid cycle. Is like, did Did you miss those performance modes? Well, okay, all right. Well, like you can get that back if you spend $500 on a new machine.
I can't go back to 30, Patrick. I just can't do it.
I know. I think there's going to be too many games have done it for too long. I actually think there's going to be pressure on developer. There is now an expectation that players are going to get something akin to PC style settings. These are obviously streamlined. They're not like you're not filling
and
it's not the same way.
It won't be 100%, but not 95% of the time people are going to be expecting that.
Well, I mean, and what it may just happen is are developers going to be okay with allowing, like, the games are going to look worse and worse to hit those targets, and then the question is going to be, are they willing? Is there enough pressure from the audience to demand that as a feature that we expect in our games, and we're okay? Like, look, start the game in your fidelity mode, and then I'll go in and I'll change it. I'm okay with it looking crappier. I'm okay with, by in relative terms. I do think that is going to be a source of tension where there's going to be some major game that comes out and people are going to throw a shit fit over it, and the developers have to like scramble together to get some sort of performance mode in a patch. And like, hey, look, well, you lost most of the fancy lighting. And I think a lot of people are going to go, I'd rather have the frame rate over the fancy lighting. Yeah. Anyway, and I'm really hopeful of new technology, the AMD's FSR and DLSS for a new Switch. That could, I guess that's the savior, right? Like, just let the AI do it.
We don't know. Yes, let the AI do it for you. There's a lot of promise there. It's working on PC to some extent. DLSS 3.0 looks incredible. I haven't messed around with it myself yet, but there's a lot of hopes, but we'll see. That tension's probably still going to crop up though. Remedy Entertainment signs a co-development and co-publishing agreement with 505 Games for Control 2. So Control 2 is coming. This was a project they originally referred to as Project Heron.
Well, I was going to say, they announced this game. This is getting this 2 bites at the apple. Like, get 2 rounds of headlines from the press for a game they already announced. They just formally put a 2 on it this time.
Yes, they've now just actually put a 2 on it, and people are, hey, listen, people like that Control game, and now they've, yes, you're right, they've confirmed this. I guess it's not like we got some of the details. This is them like talking to investors in this post that they did. And they explained it like this. Control 2's initial development budget amounts to 50 million euros, and Remedy will retain the ownership of the game's intellectual property. The development, marketing, and post-launch investments, as well as the future net revenues generated by the game, will be equally split between 505 Games and Remedy. I guess it's just kind of neat to get those kinds of details in something like this. That's pretty interesting that they just flat out say, here's the budget, and here's how the split's going to work between this publisher and this developer. I'm like, oh, that's really, I guess, I never even really thought about how it might work for, how does the money get split after you make enough money where it makes up for the cost, and now you're making just proceeds? Is that, was it just 50, 70, 30? How's that work? It's like, well, no, the publisher's going to be putting a lot of money in, so it's 50-50, and they're working on it together, and everyone seems really happy with this. I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool to see how it works. I kind of wish we got this more often. I don't know. I'm sure there's a million reasons why we don't, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think seeing underneath the hood, it's kind of stuff that maybe you'll hear about when you ask behind the scenes, but in terms of it being just like laid out for folks is pretty rare. And, in an industry that tries really hard to retain its secrecy, even on things that are kind of goofy. I'm sure the argument here is why you don't hear about stuff like this is the more people know about the numbers companies are agreeing to, the more you can use that in your own negotiations to, get better deals. And so the notion of keeping that stuff a secret is less to do with, we don't want the audience to understand how much money it takes to build a game. It's more, the deals they're making with developers down the road. They don't want people to be able to point at X, Y, and Z. But so, yeah, it's interesting to get that. I'm the sliding door of Control being a hit or not being a hit, and what that means for the future of Remedy is like such like an interesting question. I'm so much happier that they are not like a subsidiary of XY, some company, Microsoft or Sony, like the kind of suitors that would have made sense to pick up a studio like Remedy.
They've worked with Tencent, right? Or Smile. They worked with Smilegate, a massive company in South Korea or China. I can't remember. They might have picked them up. Like, there's a lot of possibilities.
They seem ripe for just like, hey, we're, we make like games that people like. They're never enormous hits, but they make money, and we have a passionate set of fans. Like, it just seemed like at some day you were going to wake up and they got bought, and even post Control, I was like, well, maybe this would be the time that it finally happens. I think it was mostly up to Sony. I've heard like the bitterness over Quantum Break. Like, there are so many lifers at places like Remedy. I just don't think Microsoft could have ever bought them after how messy the production was on that game. But this world where we're like Remedy is making like Max Payne like remakes and Alan Wake 2, like a game we should hear about sooner rather than later. Control 2, a game that seems pretty far off, but seems like it's going to be a lot more ambitious and go outside and do some other cool stuff. It's exciting. I've been a Remedy fan for ages, and I'm happy to be in a world where I'm worried that they're spread too thin.
Right.
But they're spread too thin making games I want to play.
Right. They've gotten past the spread too thin working on the Crossfire campaign. That's
some weird mobile game that I don't want to play. And look, you got to pay the bills.
Yes.
But like pay the bills by making Alan Wake 2 and calling it like a survival horror game, and then I'm good to go.
European Commission responds after Microsoft Activision comments from staffer received backlash. This comes from Jordan Midler at VGC. The European Commission has clarified claims of perceived bias in the probe into Microsoft Activision's Blizzard deal, following comments from a senior staff member on social media. Ricardo Cardoza, the deputy head of unit institution. The deputy head of one of the things in there at the governing body, whatever. I'm not going to be able to try it again. He tweeted Interinstitutional. Thank you so much, Patrick. He tweeted earlier this week that the, quote, commission is working to ensure that you will still be able to play Call of Duty on other consoles, and then in parentheses, including my PlayStation. A weird thing to say.
That's really weird. I had not seen this story. I was reading this and my eyebrows were just going up.
It gets even better. The state, and for most of it, it's not really that much of a problem because, as they go on to explain, he's not working on this case. He's not even really in the competition side of this institution, where it's like up to him to decide, like, oh, is this going to hurt Constitution or not? That's not his thing. He's just saying, oh, the place I work for is looking into that, and I care about it because of my PlayStation. Still a weird thing to say. But in the response, Tweaktown, a website, was able to get a response here. Mr. Cardozo works in the Director General for the internal market and not in the Director General for competition, the statement reads. Mr. Cardozo is not involved in the assessment of this transaction. Furthermore, this is gonna make me laugh. Furthermore, as indicated clearly in his Twitter profile, he tweets in a personal capacity. I love it. It says right in his Twitter profile, tweets are my own. They do not reflect my employer. I'm like, oh, that kills me. It's like,
that gets me. That's,
someone pointing to that.
Every one of these statements is just this we're making fun of Ricardo, but also like I'm sure had a real bad week. Was in a lot of meetings, just a lot of lot of meetings.
Office meetings, absolutely, yes. I mean, it is a weird thing to say. Like, you probably shouldn't talk that way if you're in that position. But obviously, the reaction to it also was wild from fanboys. Of course, feeling like it's gonna be completely unfair. And it just wasn't going to affect the overall proceedings at all. Even when he wrote that, I'm just like, this is not going to be an actual problem. This is going to be decided by sober bureaucrats who aren't talking like this. On Saturday, Cardoso tweeted the following: to clarify, I am not involved in the assessment of the merger and don't even work in the department dealing with mergers. As is clear from my profile, my comments are personal and not a commission position whose decisions will be taken on the basis of the facts and the law. But yeah, a banner day for tweets.
The PR department wrote that one.
Yes,
I don't think Mr. Cardoso wrote that tweet.
Yeah, so I think Cardoso was happy to hand over Twitter. Just please take it away from me, please. I don't need it anymore. Sonic Frontiers director says he's taking feedback seriously. This comes from Chris Scullion at VGC. The director of Sonic Frontiers has suggested that there are still some areas in which the game can be improved. Morio Kishimoto posted a tweet on Friday in which he stated that the Sonic team was studying the feedback from players and critics and taking that into account. I'm sorry I haven't communicated with you until now because we've been busy since the release, Kishimoto tweeted. I'm relieved that the release date has arrived and that the game seems to have reached everyone safely. We are checking out the opinions of critics and players, and as you have pointed out, there are still areas where we are not quite there yet, and we will take this seriously like a global playtest. Now, obviously, some people heard that. Global playtest, this game costs a lot of money. I'm paying for it up front. How dare you make me pay for something I'm going to test? This was translated from Japanese. It's not exactly what he meant. He's just saying, listen, we're going to treat it that way in that we will be listening to all your feedback and we're going to implement it as if it were like a global playtest. But it was just, lost in translation. But once again, fans got pretty mad. I'm pretty happy with Sonic Frontiers, Patrick. I have low expectations for that little blue guy. This game is fun, and I'm kind of glad that they seem to be in a place where they can build on this, and I'm glad that they are listening.
Yeah, you know, I'm not a huge Sonic. I'm like in Mario vs Sonic. I picked Mario because of the precision platforming, and the Sonic like speed just never quite clicked for me.
Same.
So it's not shocking that. But the game I liked the most of the Sonic games was, well, other than stacking cartridges on top of each other multiple times in Sonic and Knuckles, which was a very, very novel
very good stuff.
thing. Sonic Adventure is my favorite Sonic game because it's the most like a Mario game in that you have fast, thrilling chase sequences that are like sandwiched in between like slower exploration, more precision platforming. And so I was not shocked. I've been rooting for Sonic Frontiers ever since it was announced because it just seems it's like it's a big audacious game. It doesn't make a ton of sense that that this is the game they should make. It's like someone played Breath of the Wild and like let's make Sonic as well. So I'm rooting for it. I hope it gets better over time. I'm glad that they made something weird, even if it doesn't quite land with everyone. But it is I'm glad that they're doing their playtest. Playtest is just a bad, like whoever the translator is, like don't like say something different next time. Fanboys are going to latch on to something weird like that.
Right. Yeah. Just however you need to like come up with a better term originally. And then, yeah, absolutely. Nintendo emphasizes the importance of Nintendo accounts for its next gen console. This comes from Andy Robinson over at VGC. Nintendo talked about the importance of Nintendo account integration for its next console, which it says will allow it to link its games business with other areas such as theme parks and merchandise. In the Nintendo Switch generation, and this is a quote now, it feels like we have gotten closer to our consumers via Nintendo account, Shioda said. I think an integrated hardware-software business that captures the spirit of Nintendo will continue to be central to many of the activities that spring from the strategy described in today's briefing. The most important thing with our dedicated video game platform is to deliver a unique gaming experience. In our development of both hardware and software going forward, we must consider ways to more easily connect our core video game business with the consumer experience outside of our dedicated video game platform through Nintendo account. We are not at a stage where we could talk about the next generation platform yet, but we think it is most important to create unique integrated hardware software products. The activities we leverage through Nintendo account should be well connected to those products. Now, Patrick, Nintendo's in a weird position where they're looking around maybe a little bit and like, okay, we do have to get ready for our next gen platform. And whenever we do that, there's always this weird reset period and we lose a lot of the momentum that we had from the last thing. And that's frustrating. And we've always been able to build it back up. So whatever, but why do we keep doing this to ourselves? And obviously a company like Sony has proven, well, you don't have to do it if you have a strong service component. Now, Nintendo's built something up like that over the last few years. And the question has been from, I think, fans, how much of that is going to be contiguous from one platform to the next? And Nintendo's obviously talking now, most of it should be, and they're finding more ways to make it more connective. But do you think that this company can figure that out in the way that like PlayStation Network just seemed to work? Yeah, we tried not to laugh. No. We tried not to, everybody.
I was like, this is a bunch, while you're reading all these quotes, I'm just like, what do any of these words mean? Like, isn't he just saying, when you buy the new one, the old games should work, and this is just like a fancy way of saying
and you
that?
Hope that's what I kind of hope that's what they're saying here, but it's also like, no, they're talking about, and we're going to connect our theme parks. And I have a graphic here.
I mean, stuff like that, sure, right? All that does make sense. Like that, you'd somehow have that tied in as these theme parks come online. Across is the California one next year, right? Next summer?
Yes, the California one is next year. Yes.
Sure, this all makes sense, but it is very much a show me that you can do it. Like, look, if all they do is just I can sign into the eShop and download the games I already play. They don't even have to run better. Yes, I would love if they did, but you're not going to do that. Like my games are not going to run at better resolutions, at better frame rates.
They might even have new problems, but just mostly work.
I think it's like that. I look at this and go, look, man, just let my games like carry over and like I can download them again and play them again. Beyond that, like we're cool.
Yes, that's exactly. I just want to feel continuity of my digital purchases, which I have a lot of on the Switch. And if that's And if that goes, then I'll keep my subscription to Nintendo Switch Online and all that stuff. Yeah, exactly.
A virtuous cycle. We all aspire in our lives to achieve the virtuous cycle.
Exactly. That's what we're aiming for here.
I think maybe is that what Sonic is? They call it the Sonic cycle. Sonic needs to get on the virtuous.
Yeah, he needs to get off the Sonic cycle onto the virtuous. Listen, maybe well on his way. Maybe finally getting there. All right, let's go back here. Nintendo Japan is now refusing to repair products if its customers threaten or harass its staff. I like this one. It's just a small one.
Okay.
Yeah, Nintendo's Japanese arm has implemented a new policy in which its repairs staff can refuse to fix or replace a product if the customer who submitted it behaves in an abusive manner. This is like there's no like rules or laws, I guess, in Japan against like people not abusing or harassing employees at a company, which is like not something I would associate with Japan, but who knows? I don't know anything. They said that this covers things like insulting or denigrating remarks, invasion of privacy, excessive demands such as free repair when the warranty has expired, demanding an apology from Nintendo or its staff without reasonable cause, excessively repeating the same request or complaint, defamatory comments on social networks or websites. So if I gotta watch what I tweet now because I'm really like yelling at Nintendo about we're not gonna fix your Switch.
Just fix the Joy-Cons.
Yeah,
just I mean, it still is wild that is a U.S. only policy.
Right,
that the rest of the world
right.
Not.
It's a U.S. only like that. The policy you're talking about is like the warranty is just extended permanently, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that was a story I reported some years back.
Right.
Was I had a source that was familiar with some of the internal documentation in like Nintendo's like repair units, and there was an update at some point that was, hey, like not in so many words, and like there was a long version of it. The short version of it was, we're just gonna repair them. Like it does not matter if it's out of warranty. It does not matter what the situation is. Like the Joy-Con drift is an issue, just repair it. And so someone reached out to me about that and was like, this seems like the kind of information people should know, like that, like instead of just like throwing their Joy-Cons out and like would not, because they don't want to deal with the warranty process, like they should just send them in. And actually Nintendo's pretty quick about like sending your stuff and getting it back. And my understanding is when I published that story, sometimes you can't be fully aware of how much money you've cost a company. Here's what I'll say. I'm surprised Nintendo still sends me codes like for games based on my understanding of what happened after I published that story. A lot of people sent in Joy-Con.
I'm actually doing a mental inventory right now of like, I mean, I need to do that again. So once again, it costs a little bit of money.
I got a follow up from some of the people I talked to, and they were like, oh boy. I was like, what? They're like, let's not talk about it. And I was like, okay.
Our official statement to investors is, oh boy. Oh boy.
Well, you know what? I think there's a reason it didn't get expanded. Like you can't really take it away, but I think there might. I have some understanding of why it didn't go to the rest of the world.
And it's you can listen. I'm all for protecting your employees from people harassing you. That sounds like a great policy. I can also imagine someone being like, "Please just fix my Joy-Con, even if it's out of warranty."
Yeah, I'm just curious where this like. Is there no context on like where this came where this came out of? I mean, like broadly speaking, of course, it's a good policy.
Right.
Like, fuck off if you're like a shitty.
I brought up the story. I was looking for it. I'm like, I didn't see any inciting incident or something, but there was the regulatory body in Japan. It's like, no, we applaud Nintendo for doing this, and this is a great move. It's like, okay, all right, cool. I guess that's fine. Just you should probably still fix people's Joy-Cons as long as we're doing that. All right. Let's see here. Witcher 3 Wild Hunt next gen update is launching December 14th. They just announced this right before we were about to go live.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. Enhanced with the power of next gen consoles and modern PC hardware in mind, the upcoming release of CD Projekt Red's award-winning role-playing game will feature dozens of visual, performance, and technical enhancements over the original. So yeah, if you want to get your ray tracing on in Witcher 3, that's fine. I've never been able to get into Witcher 3. Maybe it's time for another go. It's always time for another go with Witcher 3.
Witcher 3 was a game I played a bunch of and then fell off because it was long. And then I had my first kid, and there's this, this because you've got multiple kids. Like when there's this period where after your child is born, your wife's gone through all this physical, emotional headache. And, if you're lucky enough, you get some time off with her and the kid. What they don't tell you is there's like jack shit for you to do as the dad. like there's just in the first couple of months, you're mostly just there as a support character asking, can I help? It's like the baby's feeding with the, your partner, like is mostly attached to the partner. Like it's just, there's not much for you to do. But the one thing you can do is like after they've fed and if they can line up with your partner taking a nap, I would just sit and like, take whatever extra milk we had, like had the baby in one hand. And I played through over the course of a week. It was like the first time in a long time I'd done just a marathon. Like I played like 50 hours of Witcher 3 just like on a couch, like for my wife's like daytime naps. And I burned through the last major area, Skellige. I think that's like the last major island. But specifically, people need to play the expansion packs. Like the expansion packs to Witcher 3 are, I think, better than the stuff that's in the main game.
Right.
And I like stuff in the main game quite a bit already. That I think Blood and Wine, I think is the second expansion, is so fucking good that if you haven't gotten around to playing those, this is a really good opportunity to check back in with those.
Yeah.
I can't be me playing a game a second time that's more than 10 hours. No, thank you. But I'm excited for other people to experience it.
Yeah, with me, it was the first kid. It lined up right when they sent me a Switch and Breath of the Wild for review. So it's like, yep, 150 hours of that just in no time. All right, let's do the Pentiment review roundup here. This game is, I think it's launching later today or tomorrow, but reviews went up earlier this morning. From Sam Smith at Dexterdo, excuse me. He gave it a 5 out of 5. We found Pentiment to be utterly addictive and would compare our playthrough to reading a great novel that we could not put down, which feels apt since the game is stylized as a medieval storybook. While the game looks simple, there's an incredible amount of depth, and those who like to lose themselves in a good story will enjoy every moment. The game was a little bit too long when compared to other narrative adventure games, and this risks some players not making it to the closing credits, but we're mostly nitpicking. Like their protagonist Andreas, Obsidian has created a masterpiece that not everyone will appreciate, but those who do will remember it for years to come. Jordan Ramey at GameSpot gave it a 6 out of 10. Pentiment strives to exist somewhere between a history book and historical fiction, not quite committing to a detailed look at history or fulfilling a narrative arc. This is a detriment to the game's conclusion, dampening my memories of the game, save for the stories of individual characters. And then Jim Trinka at VG247 gave it 5 stars. What it boils down to is that Pentiment isn't really about solving crime. Sure, medieval whodunit works as a pithy descriptor, but it doesn't hold up much beyond the first act. It's more about art as living history, how stories passed down through spoken tradition, the written word, or the painter's brush are a way for our ancestors to speak to us across the gulf of time. Patrick, I've been playing Pentiment over the weekend. I'm at the very end of the first act, and I think that's where I'm going to do the quick look, so I'm kind of holding off to do that. I've really, really been enjoying it, and this is not exactly something that, as I was starting, I'm like, oh, this might not be a me kind of game. It's a talkie, not a doey, but it's talkie in the way that, the characters get into your head, and you begin filling in their lives with all these details that the game provides, and then you provide the rest, and the gameplay sort of happens in your head. So maybe kind of like a Telltale game, those early Telltale games where it's like, okay, I'm trying to decide what the consequences my actions are going to have, and the game has a lot of preset consequences in there, but that doesn't matter. You're still considering all the options in your head, and I have really been enjoying that because the characters here are very good. The art style lends itself to that sort of just imagining what's going to happen because it's pretty basic, so you can kind of makes it easier to imagine the consequences because you're like, okay, only this can happen or this can happen. It's a pretty good game, and I'm really glad it exists. I'm also really glad it's like something that is coming out of Microsoft from first party on Game Pass, and it's going to be like, oh, this weird little thing that a lot of people might give a chance to, and I hope they do.
Yeah, it's like Microsoft's inability to ship a big game allows a game like Pentiment that otherwise might not necessarily get as much of a spotlight, gets like kind of this weird fall, early winter slot. And I'm glad that it's the perfect sort of Game Pass game too, of like a game that people might not want to pay for, but like end up finding out that they like quite like it as a result of being able to just kind of download and poke at it. I have not had a chance to play it quite yet, but I am excited to dig into it myself. It seems like the kind of game that is probably going to swing one way or the other. Where I think the reviews you plucked reflect that, of people are going to think it's either like really incredible or like sort of weird and it doesn't click for them, and like that's kind of exciting. Like so many games are made to appeal to the widest possible audience, and the fact that this game is it's a weird little thing that you would normally see like as part of like an indie showcase. It's like, well, I hope that game finds an audience. And it's like, okay, well, Microsoft's publishing it. And that'd be really cool if they could get into a cadence in the future where they're able to find time for their studios to publish things like this alongside, the big swings that they're cooking up themselves.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to the polls. Someone mentioned the Game of the Year award nominees for the Game Awards from Jeff Keighley are live. I don't know if we're going to be able to get to that today, but let's do this poll real quick. Do you think the next Nintendo console will be fully backward compatible? This comes from our show on Thursday. 55% said yes, 45% no. We talked a little bit about this, Patrick. I think there's going to be at least a significant bit of backward compatibility. Most things are going to work, but I don't know.
Yes, with an asterisk.
Exactly. There's going to be some asterisks.
Yeah, I think like broadly speaking, it probably works. But that there will be some like it's with Nintendo stuff. It is just we don't live in a world in which they could get themselves a get out of jail free card, which is just we'll just put the old cartridge slot on there.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like where there are ways that you can sort of just finagle it. I think here it is going to be like all the games, most of the games you want to play will work. The rest won't. But it's also a situation where I'm glad things like the Steam Deck exists, have been a success.
Yes.
Like I love my Steam Deck. I'm mostly waiting for the Steam Deck 2. Like in my heart of hearts, it's like there's so many things that are good about this, but so many obvious things that will get better. With, like the very obvious hardware revision that comes, in the next, year or two. And so the fact that the Switch might not be like fully compatible, stuff like that gets like dulled a little bit for me because I'm just spending more time. If I want the options, I've got them on Steam Deck, and also Nintendo Valve agrees. Didn't they put in a Switch emulator into one of their YouTube trailers?
One of their videos, yeah. Yep.
Someone's sending up a bat signal that hey,
just use it right there.
Doesn't play your old Switch games. We got options.
Oh, man, it wasn't even like the Steam. It wasn't like the Wii U emulator. It was just straight up the Switch emulator. It's incredible stuff.
Oh, good, so good.
They fixed that pretty quick, but man, I'm never gonna forget that.
All
right, let's get up to the poll for Wednesday. Do you feel a need for a PS5 Slim? I think that's a good way of putting it. Game Mess Mornings. I'm just gonna be curious to say what the audience thinks about. I don't know if I need it, but some people are like, listen, I do want a smaller thing. Let's do 2 days. There we go. We'll post that. All right, Patrick, thank you so much for joining me, man. You got anything going on you want to tell people about?
Yeah, as always, you can support what we're doing at Waypoint over at waypointplus.com. If our line, Jeff, we're going to have you on sports.
I would love to
our twice a month. Was that bi-weekly? I always get
I'm always afraid to use bi-weekly because that was twice a week or twice a month. Yeah,
we do it twice a month. We do it twice a month, every other week. Rob Zachney, my colleague, and myself, we finally just took our DMs about the Bears and said, what if we just push our audience a little bit further, and will you listen to two amateur analysts talk about mostly their own team? And so far the audience, they're listening, and so that's their problem, not mine. But if you'd like to join them and listen to us talk about sports and movies and a whole bunch of other things, you can join us over at waypoint.vice.com or look for Waypoint Radio on your podcast platform of choice.
Yeah, I have it downloaded right here. The last title was Sports. The Bears Don't Suck? ?
Yeah, but hey, you know what? Our teams are always in that mix.
Yeah. It's never are they good? It's maybe they don't suck. That's the question.
There was I spent a lot of time in Wisconsin. I have a lot of family and friends in Wisconsin. I have a lot of Packers fans in my life, and there's a team that's had a lot of real highs, right? Like going to back-to-back NFC Championship games, and the way they always put it to me, I want to just punch them in the face.
Sure.
Well, you don't know how bad it feels to lose at the highest heights. And I'm just like, I want to fucking murder you, because the question there is like, would you rather? This was put to us in a previous podcast. Was would you rather have a team that wins the Super Bowl and then sucks for the next 5 years, or would you rather have a team that is consistently in the mix, fun and good over those 5 to 6 years? And my answer was easy. It's like, fuck the Super Bowl. Like, I have just been miserable for so long, for so many years. I'd rather just have the good team that makes my Sundays a little brighter, and I'll figure out the Super Bowl another time.
I mean, the Lions were good in 1991. That's it. That's it.
And you haven't won a Super Bowl in the Super Bowl era, correct?
I mean, they've won one playoff game, I think, maybe. Yes. That was that year, and then they saw met the Washington team, and then it didn't go very well. Yeah, so, man, get me on sports. I would love to come on there and talk.
Right,
absolutely. Maybe as we figure out what the draft's going to look like. It'd be a good time to.
Maybe we'll wait a couple more weeks so we can start talking about bickering about draft order.
Absolutely.
That's what happens when your team sucks.
That's just already talking about the draft. Hell yeah. Up on Giant Bomb this week. It's going to be like a normal week for the most part, except for probably a few more quick looks because there's so many games coming out. I'll be doing Pentiment here pretty soon. We're going to figure that in the meeting here that we're going to have in about an hour. But yeah, well, thank you everybody for watching. You're the best audience in gaming. As always, have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye.